So moving forward, we have our mentor, Mr. Elvin, and I would like to invite him for a talk. He's a leading photographer who clicks everything the most people regret after they have had them. That is weddings, food, and babies. He has been featured extensively in national media, including the Times of India, Deccan Chronicle, and Spice Food, among others. Elvin has conducted a mentorship program in photography with the students at Unheard. I would like to invite Elvin.
Yeah, thanks, Dikshita. Am I audible?
Yes.
Am I audible? Yeah, okay,
yes.
Awesome. So I don't do too many of these Zoom sessions, so this is really new for me. But yeah, thank you for giving me this opportunity, and it's really nice to see so many parents logging in on a Sunday when they could have been doing something else. So it's really nice to see that. Thanks, Ahmed. Okay, so I'll just give a brief background about myself. So my name is Elvin Jacob. I am based out of Bangalore, and I specialize, as Dikshita mentioned, in weddings, food, and family documentary. Family documentary bit is on a personal thing, so this out of personal interest that I shoot, but a lot of weddings and food. Now, I have a journalism background. I did my BA and my MS in communication and journalism, and in college I was really interested in radio. So I've interned and worked in several radio stations. They used to be WorldSpace, now they don't exist, but I had a wonderful internship experience there. So worked over there. Then I worked in All India Radio. This is not as an internship. I worked there. I did a few shows there. So I was heavily into radio, and then TV happened, and I really liked it. So immediately after graduating my masters, I started working for NDTV in Bombay, and recession hit, so I had to cut short that career, and I just continued TV, but back in Bangalore. I was working as an assistant producer here, and then I shifted to public relations. So because I had a journalism degree, and I had worked in TV, so I knew what happens in a newsroom and what are editors and bulletin producers looking for. So I started working in public relations, but within public relations itself, I did proper public relations for around 18 months, around 1.5, 2 years, wherein I got to work with companies like Flipkart and Carrot Lane, which was not too big back then. So I'm talking about 2011, 2012. It wasn't, Flipkart was big back then, but not so big. So got to work on their communication strategies. Of course, there was a huge team involved. And after that, I moved on to a more, like a strategy role within the company. So I got to work with, I used to, in a month, I used to meet nothing less than 50 to 70 startups, entrepreneurs daily. We would be meeting so many entrepreneurs because the agency that I was working with was specialized in startup PR. But I was also doing photography on the sidelines. And so I started shooting weddings in 2000, unofficially in 2010, I think I started. But then I started shooting properly in 2011, November. And over the last 11 years, I've been shooting, and only in 2016, only 5 years back, did I go full time into it. So, when I went full time, apart from wedding photography, I also started working with food brands. So, be it your displays of these food brands at airports, malls, theaters, sometimes in railway stations. Right from that to the Instagram, Facebook, social media, website. So brands like Fresh Menu, Krispy Kreme, Chai Point, Barbecue Nation, and recently Nandu's Chicken. So been working with them. So that's a background about me. Just to talk about the scope of photography. So I'll just show you. Unlike other speakers, I only after I was watching it did I realize I should have made a presentation, but I'll just probably show you a couple of slideshows, which might throw some light on my work. So I'll just start screening. 1 second. Just give me 1 second. Okay, so I'm not able to share it. I'll send across a link to my food photography work. So yeah, so I've been working with these brands, and just to understand the scope, we are living in a heavily visual world. If you look at it, consciously or unconsciously, all of us are we are consuming visual content every single minute, be it on our phones, on your television, when you're driving your car, or if you're in a bus, or you're in a metro, you're always looking at things. You know, there's always, if you're inside a metro, you are basically seeing the billboards on the side. So it's a heavily visual world. So it's a very interesting field to be in. Just to give you an example how evolving the industry is, you know, things like a UX designer, a UI designer didn't even enter mainstream lingo until maybe 15, 16 years, or maybe even, you know, more recent than that. So it's been quite fresh. And just to give you an example about how what we see and what we hear really affects our experience of the brand. You might have seen a lot of restaurants and food brands have the color red and yellow prominent, be it on their menus, be it on their logos, or any advertisement or anything, any billboard of theirs, right? So because a lot of studies have kind of proven that red and yellow together, they tend to make the person hungry. So that way, that's a very very deliberate move on the part of the brands. And honestly, that has been there for a while now, you know, because just to give you an example, like if you were to watch an ad of an SUV on television, right? You will never see the SUV stuck in traffic. You'll never see that. The advertisement will never show the car sitting in a garage, unless and until in a particular context. You'll always see an SUV going through streams, through mountains, through rivers, and, you know, probably making a small jump, stuff like that, because it's supposed to, the ad should complement the what the car really stands for. If a brand is all about being fresh, like a food brand, if it's all about being fresh, they cannot afford to show you stale food, right? They will not show you anything which goes against their brand. So that's where all these things kick in. So it has to be, it's very very intentional. Someone was I was talking to was telling me that, and it's actually quite true also, that anyone can take a good photo. I mean, you invest some time, anyone can get good at making good photos or making films. But the question of why are you shooting something in a particular way, that matters a lot, and that's what will make you successful also eventually. Also, there are a few other examples also, like how the audiovisual really affects, like Pringles, for example. I mean, I was listening to a podcast couple of months back, and it's a very interesting podcast. It's about sound. So they were talking about how Pringles, the engineers actually worked on the sound of Pringles when you're probably taking it in the mouth and crunching them, because it was proven that higher the frequency, the good it tastes. Like the better the taste, and it feels really good. Same thing with a lot of other things. Like you might think it's unintentional that it's there, but it's not. Like everything what brands is intentional, and that's where communicators, like, you know, photographers and all, photographers, or be it people in the marketing team, branding, the ad agency, the PR agency, everyone kicks in. Basically they work together to send across a coherent message. So like in the previous talk, Tara was mentioning about invoking an emotion. So that's a very very important thing in photography. If you can take a great photo, you can, and anyone can do that, but if it fails to invoke an emotion, it's probably not that great a photo. So a lot of people have a 3-second rule in photography, which basically means that if you pause on a photograph for more than 2-3 seconds, and if it forces you to think, or it probably, you know, reminds you of something, or some thought comes into your mind, it's probably a good photo. It has done its job that way. So like that. So even during COVID, I think the importance of audiovisual content or even the written content has never been more proven than during COVID, because uh, all of us were staying at homes, right? We were not stepping out. Even if you're doing your jobs, you're sitting at home and doing all your work. And we are glued to our screens. I mean, be it the big monitor or the laptop or on your phones. A lot of people were actually investing a lot of time and energy and into their phones, the end users. So what do the brands do? There is a very big brand, a food brand in India, who's in a normal year, their traditional budget, annual budget runs into 600, several hundred crores, like 600, 700, 800 crores. That's their annual budget for advertising alone. During COVID, this particular brand shifted their budget so much so that their digital budget, basically for digital content, be it for social media or for or OTT platforms or things like that, the budget for digital exceeded the traditional budget. So we can only imagine what the numbers were. So that's how important it has. In fact, food industry, a lot of industries actually suffered due to COVID, and but it's the exact opposite for many restaurants and 100% for companies like Swiggy or Zomato, because it was a field day for them. Like, they earned quite a bit. And how do they sell? How do you sell something? You cannot just say, like, I have this great dish that I'm selling. You cannot just say that. You should show it. And if no, sometimes you must have wondered, you were not feeling particularly hungry, but you saw something on the menu and you're like, oh, okay, I really want to have that. So that's the whole point. If you feel hungry watching it, then that really serves the purpose of the brand. So a lot of these companies actually benefit out of it. Now, coming to the scope of photography. So we are in 2021. A lot of things have changed in the last 15 years. So when I was starting out, wedding photography was not big. In 2010, I remember when I was going to shoot my first wedding, I remember telling my parents, and my mom didn't really ask me why, but then she was a little shocked. Why are you going to shoot a wedding? I thought you were going to attend someone's wedding. Why are you going to shoot a wedding? They didn't really know. There were very, very few people who were doing wedding photography back then, the one that we know. And even the idea of wedding photography itself has evolved. So that's a different tangent altogether. So there is a huge scope of photography in 2021. The need, again, as I was saying, I cannot stress on this enough. Everything is visual, right? Instead of meeting people online, instead of meeting people offline, we are meeting people online, and we get exposed to these ads time and again. There's a push notification that keeps coming on your phone. Everything is visual. It cannot be just text, because our eyes tend to look for colors. Our eyes are desperately looking for patterns, things that interest us. So if you were to come to the education bit, how do you become a photographer? Honestly, there are multiple ways to become a photographer, and no one way is correct, or we cannot be assured of success, quote unquote, if you follow one particular way. So there's one academic route. You can finish your 12th. You can be a science graduate or a commerce or an arts graduate, anything, and you can enroll yourself in a photography school, and you can graduate and you can start working as a photographer. Of course, that's one way of doing it, and there's no harm in doing that way. But and there's something that I really believe in, and I say this in multiple conversations, in multiple contexts, that education can never be a bad investment. So if you study something, if you learn something today or tomorrow, it will come into use for sure. Now, the thing with going to photography college or film school is it's very expensive. It's at least for me, I did consider going to a photography school, but then I realized, if I have to study abroad, I need to spend quite a bit, and I don't know how soon I can recover that amount of money. And when I say that, I'm talking about maybe like 60, 70, 80 lakhs, or even a crore, if you factor in everything. Now, back in India, there are some good schools, but again, I won't call it a problem, but it's the same factor. The cost factor kicks in because to go to film school, you cannot just walk in with the phone camera. You need to have a good camera, what's called a full frame, uh, 2, 3 lenses, high quality lenses, a good computer, and the other accessories and things like that. So the costs definitely run up really high, so it becomes kind of a front heavy investment. Of course there are multiple things that you get in return. For example, the networking that you can do in a photography school is absolutely priceless. I mean, these people eventually after 5, 6 years, each of them would be, someone might be a food photographer, someone might be a photographer on a film set, or might be a wedding photographer or a commercial photographer, someone shooting fashion or product, or any of those things. And they would have created their own networks, and you get access to all these networks. So that happens if you go to a film school, or if you go to a photo school. Now, coming back to what if you're not going to a film school. So a lot of people, now the thing about photography, communication, all these fields, is that it's it's not boxed. You didn't exist in a box. It's very parallel. You can do, like, for example, in my case, I've pivoted my entire professional life. I wouldn't say I jumped ships, but I've always done something that I felt, okay, this is good, and I can do it because my background does help me. Now, I'm working as a photographer now, but does my experience in TV help me? Yes, it does. Communication, does it help me? Yes, it does. So a lot of things like that. Even after graduating, so after when I graduated from my actual PR role into a strategy role, was also doing a bit of, not a bit, actually quite a bit of, I wouldn't call it sales, but then talking to startups, as part of which I was telling you that I used to meet so many startups every month. So that gave me sales experience. So it helps me today to sell my services to a potential client. And how do they want it? How do they not want it? What are they looking for? What works? What doesn't work? It does help me a lot. Now, a lot of photographers who are working today, if you look at them, a lot of them are engineers. A lot of them have done their MBAs. Some of them are, from like uh, one a good friend of mine, and who's also a food stylist, and who, in fact, when I conducted the workshop with Unheard, she did take a session on food photography, on food styling itself. So she's from a hotel management background, and she has done an MBA as well in marketing. And she takes beautiful photographs, and we tend to work together often, wherein she's doing just the styling bit, and I'm doing the photos. So someone like her, we are from a completely different background. She's from hotel management, hospitality sector, and I'm from the broadcast or the journalism communication sector. So it's completely different. But then a lot of people tend to pivot, and honestly, it's not wrong. It's just supply and demand. You're just doing things that will help you stay afloat, and what works for you here, eventually it's great. If it does work for you. Now, just to think of um, issues with that, uh, a lot of things you have to learn on the job. So a lot of people, what they do is they tend to assist or do internships in under a lot of photographers, or they assist a lot of stylists, or or maybe, let's say, filmmakers and stuff like that. So it helps them learn on the job. Of course, it helps you to network and all of that. The downside of that is that your pay is very little, because there are very few things that you're bringing to the table, apart from, of course, the actual work, audiovisual knowledge that you're bringing to the table is very less. It eventually gets better month after a few months. It does get better, and like that, your pay also gets better. But honestly, it's a process, and after 2, 3 years, you'll realize that investment was really worth it. A lot of people learn on the job, and that's a very good way, and that's how I learned. but I didn't assist anyone in photography. I mean, in hindsight, I should have, because my learning curve would have been more steep. I would have learned things faster. But I was very, very fortunate to make the move when internet is around. So um, internet, Google, YouTube is a beautiful resource of information. There's so many tutorials. I cannot tell you how much I sit and watch YouTube. I watch a lot of YouTube. I watch a lot of tutorials just to learn things. How are people photographing this? How are people editing this? And a lot of my friends, actually, I mean, who are photographers themselves, these guys also, they it's like a rabbit hole. You keep learning. You're spending a lot of time learning, experimenting, failing. After a few failures, you kind of, the more mistakes you make at the starting of your career, the better. Otherwise, you'll make mistakes in the middle, and that's not a great position to be in. Now, coming back to the topic of taking a great image. So as I was saying, anyone can take a good photo. I mean, you can go study the manual of a camera, figure out the basics, and honestly, anyone can take a great image. Especially now with your smartphones, it's becoming tougher and tougher to take a bad image, unless and until you have done something fundamentally wrong. Like probably not taking out the lens cover or something like that. It's become fairly easy as compared to how things were 20, 25, 30 years back. But even now, things that 30 in, for example, in the 1980s or 1990s, what set apart a great photographer are the exact same things that set apart a photographer today. That is basically their sense of aesthetics, their approach, their style concepts, their vision, things like that. So even then, things were like that. So that's the reason a lot of we respect a lot of photographers, or any artist, right? I mean, who did great work at the age of 60, 70. Now, I was reading a random fact that the space mission that landed, the Apollo mission that landed us on the moon, that landed humans on the moon, the computer used for that, and the calculator today is far more superior than the calculator that was used back then. But then they achieved something in that age. So it's really contextual that way. So it's things like aesthetics and stuff like that will really set you apart, and that you're not born with aesthetics, honestly. I mean, you were not born, uh, you'll not be born and suddenly you'll start understanding and appreciating Da Vinci or a Picasso or anything like that. Because honestly, even I can't, because I haven't grown up with paintings and painters and sculptures around like that. But it's a journey. So and it's constant upskilling in photography. So every single movie that you watch, every single book that you read, every single place or museum that you visit. Now, this is a huge factor. If you're going abroad to study in a photography school, and for example, in a Paris or a London, one of the absolutely greatest advantages is that when you're in a photography school, of course, you're absorbing photography knowledge and a lot of new concepts and all for 8 hours, 10 hours, 16 hours a day. But then you're in a city which has a lot of museums, and I mean, no need to go out also. I mean, in India as well, there are a lot of places like that where you go to a lot of museums and stuff like that, and you consume a lot of art, and that eventually helps you get inspired and create something nice. So that's there. And the aesthetics will essentially set you apart. Now, coming to the more important thing, money. So pricing as a concept is something that everyone struggles with. Am I charging way too much for my quality of work, or am I charging way too low? So everyone's going. It's like a sine wave. Sometimes you think you're charging really high, sometimes you think you're charging very low. And honestly, if you're working as a photographer, as a filmmaker by yourself, you're working as a freelancer, um, and that's a separate discussion in itself. Working as a freelancer or as an employee is a completely different thing. But everything really boils down to personal preference, whether you want to live a life of a freelancer or you want to live the life of an employee who's safe, doesn't need to worry about sales work coming in, because your manager will give you your work, but in this, you are the one supposed to get the work in. So if I were to talk about myself, in my busiest year, I don't think I have shot more than 80 days in a year. So out of 365 days, I would have held a camera and I would have shot on assignment, be it food or weddings, for more than 80 to 100 days a year. And COVID, that's the situation's changed. Um, but remaining days, it's not like I'm just sitting, and lying down on my bed. I am again upscaling. I'm watching tutorials. I'm going through photo books. In fact, during the mentorship with Unheard, I bought a few books and shared it with the students, and said that these are the things that inspired me. And it's very important to keep updating yourself. Be it online, you get to see a lot of work on Behance, on Instagram, so stuff like that. So it's very important. So, and also when you are working when you're working only 80 to 100, or even your busiest year 150 or 170 days a year, 100 or maybe even 200 days a year, you have 165 days left to do whatever you want. So that's an advantage, but also it comes its own um, price. So that way. So now coming to the actual money bit, there are people who have spent 12 years, 15 years in the industry who charge X for the work that they do. And there are people who have spent 2 years in the industry who charge 10X. Now, everything boils down to the value that you bring to the table, and also how well can you sell that value. Sometimes the other person will need a fair amount of convincing to tell you that you are bringing some value to the table. So, but in those 2 3 years, 4 years, if you're able to charge what you're able to charge, that also means you have done a lot of work. Again, success doesn't come overnight. So there's nothing called as overnight success, right? I mean, a lot of people tend to talk about overnight success. So this particular person achieved overnight success, but that doesn't really happen. There is a lot of you know a 15-year 20-year long journey. So that's always there. Now when they're struggling over here in those 3 or 4 or 5 years, parental support is extremely important. I cannot stress on this point enough, because most of us, I mean, if not all, if except a lucky few, a lot of us have grown up comparing ourselves to others. I mean, even now, that's what Instagram is all about, right? So we students will compare their grades with their classmates, and there'll be a lot of emotions. And also when when you're a teenager, there are a lot of emotions going through your head. You're really confused about life and what you want to do and stuff like that. And that's why parental support kicks in. Even let's say you're not a teenager anymore. Let's say you are 23, 24, struggling as a photographer, trying to get that knowledge and get that experience in, get your network in, and you're yet to break even. um, it's not a great feeling, and I can say that from personal experience, that when you see everyone around you doing great, all your classmates that you grew up with, they're doing really nice, and they're driving nice cars, and they're going on nice holidays, but you're not able to do that because you're investing. Because that photography is ultimately, in these fields, every your time is an investment. You really cannot downgrade it more. It's an investment, and it's that valuable. So parental support really means a lot. And I would go on to say that success of a photographer is directly proportional to the encouragement that they have received from their support system. Now, this support system can be your parents, can be your network, can be your siblings, friends, anyone. But someone who has been constantly discouraged will never ever make it in the creative industry, unless and until they are, I'm sure there are exceptions, but it really means a lot when people are saying, okay, it's okay, we're not putting pressure on you, instead of saying, acha, when are you going to finally start earning money? Just to put some numbers, if you are a wedding photographer.
Sorry for interrupting. I guess you are over time.
Okay,
Uh,
I'm almost done.
yeah.
2 months.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, so someone with around 2 3 years of experience, or maybe for 4 or 5 years of experience in wedding photography, can easily earn around 12 to 15 lakh a year, and it's an average fee, average money that I'm talking about. Also, it's really, again, it's a very subjective field to be in. You can spend 10 years and still earn 5 lakh annually. Otherwise, you can spend 5 years and and you can earn 20 lakhs. So you can easily do it, but the more time you spend perfecting art, it's better. The kind of jobs in photography or in an ad film or a set, I'll just tell you the stuff that's there. So there's photographer, obviously. So there are photo assistants, there are stylists, basically, who position things to make it look good, like and they work in food, fashion, product. There are people who work in lighting. So, for example, DOPs, cinematographers, they essentially design how the scene should look like. There are producers, directors, there are hair and makeup artists, and conceptualizers. So that's the production. But before to finalize on the concept, there are people who work on the copywriting, the creative director, editor, sound design, which happens in post. So yeah, so it's a very interesting field, but again, nothing is defined. Everything is about evolving that way. And the last thing that I really want to see, I really want to convey over here, is that a lot of us tend to believe that you have to be a specialist in something. But it's 2021, and a lot of people are realizing that it's no longer that way. It's the age of generalists now. If you can take photos, you can take video, you can do social media, you can write, you can speak a little bit. That's great. You have a higher chance of getting hired, because you are like one resource. You can do everything. No, not everything, but you can do some. You have a special skill set, which someone might just know how to take photos, or someone might know just to edit photos. You're definitely at a better spot. So I think instead of specializing in one thing, it's okay if you learn a little bit of a lot of things. So that really helps. Yeah. So I'm sorry for overshooting my time, but then yeah, that's all I have to say.
No worries, Elvin. Thank you so much. Thank you for emphasizing on how experience will help someone build their career, and also on highlighting how failures are needed actually to become successful. Thank you so much. Moving on